Hello and good day. So, sa episode na to, we are already in the business taxes part 3 and we are still in the other percentage taxes, of course, with create law changes. So, pero hindi lahat ng other percentage taxes yung tatapusin natin. We are going to focus only on the section 119 to 122 of the NIRC. So, this is again Gletzmar B. Igcasama CPA for those na bago pa sa channel ko. With that, let's start. Now let's start with section 119. So these are for franchise grantees. So sino tong mga franchise grantees na tinutukoy dito? So these are private corporations na binigyan ng rights ni government through a franchise to do some public service in order to help them. However, Section 119 does not cover all the franchise grantees. So meron lang dalawang grupo yung tinutukoy nitong Section 119. So the first group are those franchise grantees na related sa gas and water utilities yung services nila. Examples are si Maynilad at saka si Manila Water. Now, if you are one of those franchise grantees, you'll be taxed, of course, under Section 119. So that's 2% based on your collections or gross receipts. Now, the second group are for the radio and television broadcasting companies like ABS-CBN. So if you are one of these, there is a chance that you will be taxed under Section 119 and your tax is based on your collections pa rin, tapos times 3%. So yun yung tax liability mo. However, not all radio and television broadcasting companies ang sakop ni Section 119. So merong requisites. So una, dapat yung receipts or your collections ng past year is 10 million or less. Because if it is more, then you will be vatable, mandatorily vatable. So that's the first requisite. And the last requisite or the second requisite is that dapat hindi mo pinili na maging VAT registered person. Because you can always choose to be registered as a VAT registered person even if hindi umabot sa threshold ng vatable na mga companies. So, yun lang yung dalawang requisites. So again, sa section 119, ang covered nito are gas and water utility companies na Maynilad and Manila Water yung example, and you'll be taxed at 2% based on your gross receipts. At saka yung mga radio and television broadcasting companies na yung collections nila for the past year is 10 million or below, at saka hindi nila pinili na maging VAT registered person, then you'll be taxed at 3% based pa din sa gross receipts. So that's all for section 119. Next is we have section 120 or the overseas communications tax. So let's go directly to the most important question. When are you going to be liable dito sa overseas communications tax? Pinakauna, dapat telecommunications company ka. At pangalawa, dapat you have collections or receipts from your customers that are calling from here sa Philippines to abroad. Because actually, the requisite here is that the communication dapat nag-originate from the Philippines to abroad. So, if you have that, then you will be liable sa ano? Sa tax na 10% based on the amount paid by your customers for the overseas calls. So, yung overseas calls can be in the form of a telegram kung may gumagamit pa. Pwede din to telephone or else yung wireless mobile devices. So, under section 120, it's very clear also na hindi taxable yung mga receipts na nakuha mo from your customers that are calling domestically. Pero subject pa rin yun sa business taxes. So if your receipts are more than 3 million, vatable yung mga receipts na nakuha mo from your customers that are calling domestically. But if that is below 3 million, then they will be subject to section 116. So ganun lang kasimple tong section 120. Now, meron ding exceptions to. The exceptions, meron akong acronym na DING or DING. So D stands for diplomatic services. So if ever the overseas call is because of diplomatic services related, then exempt to sa overseas communications tax. At saka if ever the call is from an international public organization and they are calling from Philippines to abroad, then this is also exempted. As well as if ever mga news company yung nagko-call from Philippines to abroad, that is also exempt yung mga calls na yon. And if the government is calling from here, of course, to other countries, then that is also exempt. So, eto lang po yung section 120. Now, let's go to section 121. But before we move forward to section 121, of course, meron akong gustong i-emphasize, and that is if ever pumasa ka in either section 116, 117, 2127, then you'll be liable to other percentage taxes kahit pa yung receipts mo is more than 3 million. Say for example, 10 million. It doesn't matter. You'll be liable to other percentage taxes and not in VAT. So yun lang yung gusto kong i-emphasize. Now let's go to section 121. So etong section 121 is dedicated to banks and non-bank financial intermediaries performing quasi-banking functions. But before we go to the taxes, of course, we need to differentiate tong dalawang to by knowing their definition. So when we talk about banks, according to the law, ito po yung entities engaged in the lending of funds obtained in the form of deposits. So itong banks, nagpapautang. Of course, yung pinapautang nila is from the deposits of the public. Samantalang itong non-bank financial intermediaries, the main source of funds is not only the deposits, they are also borrowing funds from 20 or more personal or corporate lenders at any one time. So, ito yung main difference nila. So, ito yung subject sa section 121. Of course, merong exempted sa mga taxes that will be imposed by section 121. And one of it is the income by the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas na na-earn niya in the pursuit in its legally mandated functions. So, you already know the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas is very important in stimulating the economy, right? So, if ever we're talking about Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, one of its main functions is to control the money supply in a country. So siya yung bahala if ever i-increase yung money supply or i-decrease yung money supply sa economy depending on what is needed. Now, marami pa yung mga mandated na mga functions. So if ever incidentally nagka-income yung BSP because it is doing its legally mandated functions, that income is not subject to section 121, exempted siya. And of course, number 2, income ng mga rural banks, but not all the rural banks. Yun lang mga rural banks that are already existing before April 2, 1993 at dapat 5 years in operations na sila. So meaning, hindi exempt yung mga rural banks although they're already there sa April 2, 1993 or before April 2, 1993 na bago pa lang. Like for example, 2 years pa lang yung operations ng isang rural bank noong April 2, 1993. They are not exempted from Section 121. They will pay taxes mandated dito sa Section 121. And number 3, the credit cooperatives. So merong mga cooperatives under the Cooperative Development Authority na nagpapautang. They are not subjected to this section 121. So if you can remember, credit cooperatives and multipurpose cooperatives, ang kanilang credit na operations is exempted from VAT. Tapos hindi din sila subject dito sa section 121. So maganda yung sa kanila because they are VAT exempt at saka OPT exempt din. So that's it for the 3 exceptions. Since we already know kung ano yung mga entities na dapat taksan as well as meron na tayong mga exceptions, now let's go to the tax na babayaran under section 121. So, if you're a bank or non-bank financial intermediary, malamang yung main source of income nyo po is income from lending activities. So, ano to? So, yung income from lending activities, let's say for example, we have a simple loan from you as a bank to your client, you are going to earn some interest there. So, interest income is one of those income from lending activities. But sometimes, The bank and other financial intermediaries are performing finance lease transactions, or in simple terms, rent to own transactions for cars and for house and lots. So whereby yung client mo, binibigyan mo ng house and lot as well as ng cars, pero they are going to pay periodically. So parang rent lang. However, after paying for a lot of years, nata-transfer din naman yung ownership sa kanila nung car at saka nung house and lot. So that's finance activity, finance lease activity. So in that transaction, the banks and other financial intermediaries are also earning income. So income from lending activities pa rin yun. And we have other charges. It is because sometimes the banks are deducting something, mga charges like service charges and etc., which are actually income din ng mga banks and other financial intermediaries. So those are to be taxed. So ano yung tax nila? Yung tax is if ever nagpautang ka or nagpa-finance lease ka ng ang maturity period is 5 years or less, 5% yung tax na liability mo. Pero if ever long term, yung pagpapautang mo, so meaning more than 5 years yung maturity period, you'll be taxed at 1%. Pero may twist nito. Because even if you are normally extending loans na may maturity period na more than 5 years, let's say for example 10 years, hindi ka makakatakas dito sa 5%. It is because even if 10 years yung maturity period, after 5 years of paying ng yung customer or client, the remaining maturity term, hindi mo maiiwasan talaga na magiging 5 years na lang or less yung maturity term. So, you'll be liable for the remaining 5 years ng 5%. So, para mas maintindihan to, let's have an illustrative problem. So, you need to assume the shoes of ABX Bank na nag-release ng loan ng 1 million to Gletz with an annual rate of interest na 12%. Tapos yung maturity term is, for example, 6 years, which is more than 5 years. The question is, how much is the tax due every year from year 1 to year 6? So, let's compute. So, una, kunin muna natin yung sa year 1. Tapos kunin natin yung interest income. So, we have 1 million times 12%, we have 120,000. So, yung tax mo, it's because ang maturity period pa sa year 1 is more than 5 years pa, is only 1% or 1,200 yung tax due na other percentage tax under section 121. Pero, nung mag-year 2 na, of course, 120,000 pa rin yung interest income. But since the remaining maturity period is 5 years na lang, you'll be taxed at 5%, which is 6,000. And then, it will be copied from year 3 to year 6, 6,000 na yan. So, meaning again, even if nagpapautang ka na ang maturity period is more than 5 years, hindi ka makakatakas sa 5%. Because if ever your client is paying and the time is running, of course, there will be a time na yung remaining maturity period will be 5 years or less na lang. And if that happens, you'll be liable for 5% na tax. So, eto yun sa income from lending activities. Pero, marami pang income kasi yung banks and non-bank financial intermediaries at saka dito, meron pang isang twist. So, let's talk about that. So, the twist is the effect on pretermination. So, ano tong pretermination? Let's go directly to the illustrative problem. So as if you are ABX Bank and you had released a loan of 2 million to a client named Gletz with an annual interest rate of 12%. So the maturity term is 10 years. So that means yung maturity term is long term. But Gletz paid the overall debt at the end of the first quarter of the year 3. So meaning, hindi na umabot sa original maturity term nagbayad na si Gletz. So malamang nagkapera to kaya early lang nagbayad. So if that's the case, this is a case. This is an illustration, perfect illustration of pretermination. So ano yung effect ng pretermination? Now let's answer the question, how much is the OPT due every year from year 1 to year 3 related to Gletz's loan. So, we're going to assume na isa lang talaga yung nagborrow ng pera sa ABX Bank. So, in order to compute that, of course, we need to first start with the interest income. So, sa year 1, the principal is 2 million times 12%, we're gonna have 240,000. So, since after year 1, the remaining maturity term is still more than 5 years, then the tax that we are going to pay is 1% lang, or 2,400. Pati rin sa year 2, 2,400 din. It's because after the year 2, more than 5 years pa rin yung remaining na maturity term. But in year 3, ibang usapan na. Why? What will happen sa year 3 is that yung maturity term na 10 years will be revised to 2 years and 3 months. It is because after the year 2, actually in the first quarter of year 3, nagbayad na si Gletz. So the revised term is 2 and 3 months na instead of 10 years. So if that will be the case, short term na yung maturity period. Dapat yung tax is 5%. So mali na tong 1% dito. So we need to recompute. So sa year 1, the same pa rin yung interest income mo. Pero you need to substitute the 5% po. So meaning sa year 1, dapat yung binayaran mo is 12,000 as well as sa year 2, 12,000. But as you can see, at the end of the first quarter pa ng year 3 nagbayad si Glet. So meaning, you still have an interest income for 3 months. So how much is that? So you have 2 million times 12% times 3 over 12. So the interest income is 60. Ito din, tataksan din to ng 5%. So which is 3,000. So overall, the tax that should have been paid from year 1 to year 3 na first quarter should be 27,000. And since nagbayad ka ng 4,800, saan to galing? Dito sa 2,4 sa year 1 at saka 2,4 dito sa year 2. So you need to pay an additional other percentage taxes of 22,200. So yun yung effect ng pretermination. So I'm going to summarize. So if ever we're talking about income from lending activities, if the remaining maturity period is 5 years or less, 5% na yung tax. Pero if more than 5 years pa, 1%. So in short, hindi ka makakatakas dito sa 5% even if you are going to extend loans to your clients ng more than 5 years. Hindi ka makakatakas ng 5%. At saka, even if nag-preterminate yung customer, mag-a-apply pa rin tong 5%. So that's it for interest. Pero again, marami pang income kasi itong banks and non-bank financial intermediaries performing quasi-banking functions. And that would be next. So we are still in section 121 for the banks and non-bank financial intermediaries performing quasi-banking functions. Although, andito na tayo sa part 2. Tapos yung i-highlight ko dito are the types of income taxed under section 121. So, number 1 is the interest from lending activities which have been fully discussed a while ago. So, let's just have a review. So, dito, if the remaining maturity period ng pagpapautang mo is 5 years or less na lang, you'll be taxed at 5%. But if the remaining maturity period is still more than 5 years, then 1% lang yung tax. So again, the twists here has already been discussed a while ago, so di na natin babalikan. Now let's go to the second type of income. So if the banks and non-bank financial intermediaries also are investing sa shares, then they will have another type of income, dividend income, equity shares, or net income of the subsidiaries if they are buying most of the shares ng isang company. So if that happens, they will be taxed at 0%, which is nice. And this number 2, wala nang ibang twist dito. So, let's go now to the third type of income ni banks and non-bank financial intermediary, which is known as net trading gains ng foreign currency, ng debt securities, ng derivatives and other financial instruments. So, itong net trading gains is simply nagpipredict lang tong mga banks and non-bank financial intermediaries kung anong mangyayari sa value ng foreign currency, debt securities, derivatives, and other financial instruments. For example, in 1 month, nagpipredict si bank that the American dollars will rise in terms of Philippine peso. So, ang gagawin dito ni bank is to purchase American dollars, of course. And after 1 month, if ever lumaki talaga yung value in terms of Philippine pesos, then magkaka-net trading gains yung bangko. So ngayon, nowadays, the trading has been made so simple and easy. Actually, you just have to predict in a specified period of time anong mangyayari sa foreign currency or sa bonds and others. Like if ever after 3 days you have predicted na tataas tapos tumaas nga, you'll have a net trading gain. Tapos kung na-predict mo naman na bababa tapos bumaba nga, then net trading gain pa rin. Now, net trading gains ng mga banks, yung tax, if ever, na babayaran under Section 121 is 7% of that net trading gains. Now, there's a twist. Why? Because sometimes the result is not a net trading gain. Sometimes it's a loss. So, what will happen? So, meron tayong illustration for that. So, during the first and the second quarters in 20X1, as if ikaw pa rin si ABX Bank, eto yung nangyari. Meron kang trading gains sa foreign currency na 250, pero meron kang trading loss sa bonds sa first quarter. So, in effect, net trading loss siya na 50,000. Pero sa second quarter, medyo mas maganda yung performance mo sa trading. It's because meron kang ang loss na 50,000 sa foreign currency, pero meron kang positive 200,000 na trading gain sa bonds na nagresulta ng 150,000 na net trading gain. So the question is, how much is the OPT on the first quarter and second quarter related to trading? So on the first quarter, the answer is none. It's because pag negative siya times 7%, that means meron kang receivable sa government at saka alam naman natin na hindi yan binibigay ng government. So, ang sabi ni government, if you have a net trading loss, you wait for another period. Baka magka-net trading gain ka. Tapos pag meron ka ng net trading gain, you deduct the net trading loss mo ng previous period. Ganun nga sa second quarter, you have a positive na 150,000. So, hindi to yung isa subject sa tax na 7%. You still have to deduct the 50,000 that has been the net trading loss sa previous period, which is the first quarter. And then, you'll have 100,000. Etong 100,000 na yung isa subject sa tax na 7% and the tax due na other percentage tax under Section 121 is 7,000. So, yun lang yung twist dito sa net trading gains. And the last type of income that a bank can have are in the form of royalties, rentals of property, whether real or personal yan na property, as well as other daw na gross income under Section 32 of the tax code. So ano tong nasa Section 32 of the tax code? Lahat to ng mga income na pwedeng ma-earn ni individual at saka corporations. So meaning, again, dito sa number 4, if the bank is earning royalties, rentals, whether sa real or personal na properties, at saka other gross income under Section 32, it will be taxed at 7%. So, yun po yung Section 121. Now, let's proceed to Section 122. Because if ever, kayang-kaya mo tong Section 121, mas kaya mo tong Section 122. So, Section 122 talks about other non-bank financial intermediaries. So, ito yung mga non-bank financial intermediaries na hindi nagpe-perform ng quasi-banking functions. So, what are the taxes? So, the taxes, before pumunta tayo sa taxes, may mga examples. Actually, the other non-bank financial intermediaries already includes the pawn shops and the money changers. So, again, what are the taxes sa Section 122 ng other non-bank financial intermediaries? So, it's similar to what is in Section 121, lalong-lalo na sa interest from lending activities because the maturity period is nagpe-play din ng important role. So, if the maturity period is 5 years or less, 5%, as well as if more than 5 years, 1%. So, that's it for this video. I hope you have learned, and if you have, then please click like, subscribe, and click the notification bell to be updated on my next videos. Siguro sa next video, we are going to finish na the other percentage taxes. Thank you for watching.